Most high-performing women don't have a fat loss problem, they have a structure problem during busy workdays. And then they blame their nighttime cravings, their discipline, work dinners, stress, time, etc. But what's actually going wrong is that they're not following a structure that helps them manage stress better. Because we know that that increase in cortisol, which is your stress hormone, leads to you also increasing ghrelin levels, which is your hunger hormone. So you will feel more hungry the same day and also the next days, meaning you will have more cravings, you will want to eat more. But also that increase in cortisol suppresses insulin sensitivity, which worsens blood sugar metabolism, and so on. So what usually goes wrong is the following, and I'll give you a little anecdote from my life to give you a bit of a better understanding of what's actually happening inside of your body. So as a diabetic, as you can imagine, when my blood sugar drops, which happens frequently, right? My blood sugar is too low because I did something wrong with the insulin dosages, then I crave sweets. I need sweets so much because my body shows me that I'm low on sugar, is actually survival mode, and it's really dangerous as well. I also see, of course, on my monitor that my blood sugar is too low, but I also feel it and I need those sweets. And what's interesting is that when I have these sweets, and theoretically what would be enough is just a glass of juice in most cases, like 200 milliliters of juice or something sugary, and then a bit of fat to stabilize that sugar. But when my sugar is so low, I crave fats and sweets so much that a lot of times I start eating and I end up overeating on sweets and fatty stuff. So I just keep eating, and that then leads to my blood sugar then rising way too high afterwards. And this is just to show that that drop in blood sugar gives you such strong cravings that you almost can't stop eating, and it's something physiological. This doesn't have to do with my discipline, of course. I would say I'm rather on the disciplined side. I can control this quite okay-ish, but still, I end up overeating. And there's of course a discipline component to it. How good are you at forcing yourself to stop doing certain things? But still, that urge is so strong, and it's just there. It's physiological. And then if you had that in the end of a stressful workday, and there's a decision fatigue, and you're generally fatigued physically, emotionally, mentally, then of course it's getting harder and harder to resist those urges. And in your situation, what's happening is that for your breakfast and lunch and also snacks in between, either you skip them on a stressful workday, or you're eating not enough protein, or maybe no fats, or not enough fats, or maybe too much carbohydrates, which then either leads to a blood sugar roller coaster and then that same blood sugar dip, which is not as strong as for me as a type 1 diabetic, but still it leads to you craving later on. And alternatively, if you just eat too little, your blood sugar just keeps dropping and dropping over time. So it's not a roller coaster in that case, but it just drops and drops. And that leads to that same reaction. So your hypothalamus essentially tells you, eat sweets now, eat sweets now. We're in survival mode, we have to do it. And then when you arrive home, either in the hotel in the end of the day or at home, then right, that's the urge where you're opening your fridge. Now, a good food structure doesn't only help you prevent the blood sugar roller coaster and these dips mid-morning or in the afternoon, but also that consistent meal timing kind of teaches your body and teaches your circadian rhythm, yeah, right, your biorhythm, so to say, as in showing you to have high energy throughout the day and then wind down at night. It's a bit like sleeping at the same time every single day. You're so used to that at some point that you're getting tired that time, right? And the same with food, and it just facilitates that. It helps your gut, it helps your liver do its job. So essentially you're supporting your body with establishing this good structure, and especially during stressful days, keeping it up. It doesn't need to be perfect, and probably when you're traveling for work, it's going to look a bit different than when you're at home. But still, this helps us improve our metabolic flexibility, improve our basal metabolic rate over time, to lose more fat and have more energy and less cravings. So that's what the good structure is about. And the breakfast actually is an interesting part, because I like to start my clients on a good breakfast because it's shown to have the biggest positive impact and carry over to that blood sugar stability I mentioned before on the whole day. So if you want to have like the biggest bang for your buck in terms of a food change, and you want to make the most progress, you should start with breakfast, because we know that when you have a proper breakfast, it has a bigger effect on your energy and blood sugar throughout the day than all other meals could have. So that's why a protein and fat breakfast with little carb is something I recommend, because that helps you avoid that blood sugar increase. And for someone that is very good at pulling sugar out of your blood, as in has a good insulin sensitivity, an oatmeal with some protein, as in carbohydrates and protein, can also work. But for most, if you're not working out a lot or genetically predisposed to being very good at pulling sugar out of your blood, having a good insulin sensitivity, generally I recommend protein heavy, then fats and a bit of carbs, and of course also fiber. So that's the idea, right? To increase satiety hormones and decrease the ghrelin, and make sure that your body has the nutrients it needs to cope with that increase in cortisol and have energy until dinner. Now, what we do for breakfast specifically is make it quick, make it easy. Things like cottage cheese or prepackaged stuff like trout fillet, salmon fillet, carpaccio. When you're traveling for work at the hotel buffet, usually they have either scrambled eggs, hard-boiled eggs, which are great options. Then if you want some variety, you can also stick with the smoked salmon. These are all good options. And alternatively, if you're really on the road, on the run, and you can't have anything, bring a protein sachet, which is the 30-gram protein powder packages, either from home or from the grocery store. Mix it in a protein shaker with some water. Eat some nuts together with it. So there's nothing that you really need to prepare, just water, powder, and some nuts. So you have some fats and you have proteins that also can keep you full till lunch. So having a stable breakfast is number one. The second thing, as you can imagine, is lunch, because even also after lunch in the afternoon, you still need to concentrate, focus, and you want to avoid the blood sugar roller coaster, but want to stabilize the blood sugar and avoid that 2 p.m. crash, which is just super important. Depending on what the situation looks like, if you're in home office, you can also have stressful days in the home office, of course. Then you want to make sure that you have something at home like an air fryer, or maybe you're using a meal prep service, which doesn't take you any time to prepare. Then something like an air fryer, or even super quick options, like mixing in some Greek yogurt or some coconut yogurt with some protein powder, adding some berries, frozen or fresh berries, something along these lines. Or also from the meal prep service, making sure when you're having this meal delivery service that you have a veggie heavy dish, proteins, fats, and again a bit of carbohydrates, limiting that carbohydrate intake to 10, 15, 20 grams for lunch usually is a good idea. And we're talking, if you want to have some concrete example, 20 grams of carbs is 50 grams of bread, for example, which is 2 little slices or 2 little toasts of bread, for example, or 1 bigger slice of bread. And that's a good rule of thumb to use. That can be salad with protein, also something on the go that works quite well. If you're bringing some can of sardines or tuna, or you're doing some beef jerky, something dry, or when you go to the grocery store, right in the beginning, there's the salad section, so you can get a prepackaged salad in plastic. And then on top of that, there's usually pre-boiled or roasted chicken. You put the chicken on top of the salad. You limit the dressing that you use, so as little salad sauce as possible. And then add the chicken, add the tuna, add the sardines that I mentioned, and the beef jerky. These are just a couple of examples when you're on the run, when you're at home. And what I also recommend, and I like to do because I'm working at home, is using my air fryer, Because you just cut some chicken and you literally put it in the air fryer for 8 minutes and then it's done. And on top of that, just a bit of salad or some veggies. And it's super quick. And when I have a bit more time, I like to boil some veggies on the side, like some carrots, broccoli, cabbage, whatever. And this is a good lunch structure that you should use to, again, stabilize blood sugar till dinner. Because otherwise, again, if you have just a croissant or you're skipping lunch, that already again leads to the roller coaster, leads to your body signaling cravings, more hunger. You were not able to manage stress as good. So that kind of structure really helps usually to stay consistent. And what I have to mention is, even if you skipped lunch but you had a proper breakfast, that usually still works quite fine. If you really had a good breakfast, and you're actually also able to eat a lot in the morning, then sometimes when I'm super stressed or busy and I have to run from A to C to A to B to whatever, then I'm doing sometimes still really good with just a breakfast and a dinner. if I have to skip it. But the breakfast is a non-negotiable. So it's a huge difference whether you skip breakfast or you skip lunch. Always skip the lunch if you have to choose one. But again, ideally don't do it and just do it the way I mentioned before. If dinner is the meal where everything gets fixed, you already did something wrong based on what we talked about earlier. Breakfast and lunch should be in place, and when that's the case, then dinner is usually quite relaxed. A lot of times for dinners we're eating out, so that's why also what I'm covering in a couple of seconds with you. But for dinner, the idea really is again to have protein, have your veggies, but add some carbohydrates, because these carbohydrates then increase your blood sugar levels and therefore also insulin levels, because insulin is that hormone that pulls the sugar out of the blood to wherever it belongs in the body. And that increase in insulin, that's one of the mechanisms only, of course, also helps transport tryptophan, which is an amino acid, right? One of the building blocks of proteins, cross the blood-brain barrier, and therefore increases serotonin levels. And that's that neurotransmitter that helps you wind down, relax, and so on. So some people actually do a form of fasting and then they skip dinner, which is really like the last thing I would do. As I said before, breakfast is super crucial, and then also dinner helps you to wind down. So implement carbs for dinner because that helps you relax and have this increase in serotonin, which is this calming, warm-ish feeling kind of neurotransmitter that also is a precursor to melatonin, which is your deep sleep hormone. So that's just super crucial. Implement your carbohydrates for dinner. I'm not saying no carbohydrates at all for breakfast and lunch. Also, if you're working out a lot, you should actually have carbohydrates for breakfast and lunch and around your training. But I'm not talking like a lot. I'm talking a bit for breakfast, a bit for lunch, and then for dinner, we're talking 60 grams plus, which can be a lot of potatoes or a big plate of rice, 250, 300 grams of boiled rice, for example. So you have an idea about like how dinner could look like. So the scenario is the same. It can be like oven veggies. It can be casserole. It can be anything that you can think of, from like simple gluten-free pasta with some sauce and tuna or chicken or even beef, steak with potatoes, air fryer, sweet potato with some form of veggie. So whatever you like, you modify this the way I mentioned, making it protein dominant, with veggies and also some carbohydrates, but don't overdo the fats at night, because if you eat carbohydrates and then also a lot of fats, it doesn't just raise the blood sugar, but the fats lead to the blood sugar staying high, and that together with increase in insulin also leads to fats being stored in the cells. So it doesn't only transport sugar from the blood, but also fats, and therefore the fats can be stored within the cells of your body, leading to accumulating body fat. And that's why we rather want to prevent like a lot of fats with a lot of carbohydrates for dinner, rather do more carbohydrates and less fat for dinner. Snacks are also super crucial, because depending if your day is super long and you have like 7:30 a.m. your breakfast and then 1 p.m. your lunch, there's like a big gap in between. It's more than 5 hours, and then you have your dinner at maybe 7:30 again. There's another almost 5 hour gap in between. That's why it's super crucial to also implement snacks when needed, because what happens if you have like a long gap, your blood sugar again drops, as I mentioned before, and that drop then leads to your hypothalamus signaling, I need snacks, I need sweets, I need fatty stuff, I need the nasty foods, so to say. And that can also happen if your meals are just too small. For example, if you do your breakfast and you don't have a big gap till lunch, or your lunch until dinner, but it's too small, then it can also lead to that same issue, because it's just not enough food to stabilize blood sugar and give you the nutrients you need to focus, be mentally there, but also physically there. That's why it's super crucial to have sufficient portions and also implement some snacks. For snacks, usually what I recommend is, again, like maximum 10 grams of carbs. It can be an apple, cottage cheese with an apple, some cinnamon on top, dash of honey if you want to. Otherwise, it can be some dark chocolate. If you don't want it to be that much, then also some nuts can work well. Like a small handful of nuts can work well. Coconut yogurt, these kind of things, beef jerky. These are like all good snacks that can be used. And when you're at events, right, cafes, meetings, work dinners, what I mentioned before, which can be another scenario, like Ideally, you're not eating out 3 times a week, 3 times a day, and 21 times a week, because then you have little control over your food intake. If you have your breakfast at home, you have your lunch from the grocery store, grab and go, for example, or the breakfast at the hotel buffet, lunch is grab and go. Then your dinner, right? You can be a bit more chill with your dinner, because if you're eating out and you have like a work dinner, then you won't be able to do everything perfectly. So take it easy, but just do it as good as you can, which means you want to limit heavy creams, sauces, whatever you're doing. If you're eating Italian, Vietnamese, Indian, you want to avoid the fried stuff, the crispy kind of stuff, everything that says tempura, for example, or things that are just very oily and a lot of sauce. And you want to stick with a rather light stuff for dinner, especially when you're eating out, which can be carbohydrates, as I said, with potatoes, carbs, Italian. You can do veggies, salmon. These all work quite well. And sometimes it can even be a mix of two starters, because sometimes there's very good starters that are protein and with protein and veggies, and are not super sauce heavy, right? So when it comes to like cafe meetings, event dinners, and these kind of things, right? It's not about being perfect, but right, taking it easy and just making the best choice possible. Sometimes there's no really good choice, but then it's still a big difference if you're doing something really bad and you're completely going crazy, right? So do it as good as you can and then relax, right? So the idea is not to stress yourself even more. That's also not a good thing, not a good thing to do. So again, simple framework: protein and fat with some veggies for breakfast, for lunch, bit of carbohydrates, totally fine. Snacks, similar idea. For dinner, we want to swap. We want to reduce the fats, increase the carbohydrates so that you can wind down, relax. If you're at the events, also totally fine. Just do it as good as you can, and then be flexible, right? Use the hotel buffets, use the grocery stores, bring something from home, plan a bit, think where you're going, and if you can implement the things that I mentioned, as I said before, and then you're going to be fine. It's really about not like the super crucial basics are just not replacing breakfast or lunch with just coffee, or skipping it all together, or just doing sandwiches and croissants. If that happens, you're going to survive it. But if you really manage to, generally in 80% of cases, implement the structure that I mentioned, it's a game changer. It's like a difference of day and night, and you're going to lose fat way easier, and also your energy levels over time will be way better. And that's why it's about like 80%, 80-20 concept, and not like 50-50. Make it 80-20, try to make it 80-20, and then you're going to be good. So on stressful workdays, to sum this up, the nutrition structure matters more, not less than usually. So it's not your job to say, oh, I'm traveling for work, so I do whatever I want. You actually need to think a bit more and plan ahead a bit more, and think where you're going, and imagine, like, think of like a proper plan that could work. It's also not about making it perfect, so you don't have to like make it happen in 9 or 10 out of 10 cases, but like 80-20, in 80% of cases you're doing great, then it's already a super great start. And then it will also work when your meetings run a bit longer than expected, right? Also when you're home, or when you're going out to cafes or events. And it's really about making it happen in all of these scenarios, because only then it's really a true lifestyle change. And as I mentioned before, if you found any of this helpful, then scroll up, subscribe to the podcast. Also leave me a rating, would mean the world to me. I'm looking forward to the next one.